Thank you for joining us today at the 2020 Sloan Sports Analytics Conference. My name is Bobby Rizzo. I'm a first-year MBA student at MIT Sloan, and it's my pleasure to welcome you to our panel, Fanalytics 2.0. Our panelists today, will be Richard Gotham, the team president with the Boston Celtics, Rob King, senior vice president and editor-at-large at ESPN, Jess Gelman, CEO of Kraft Analytics Group, Jason Robbins, CEO and founder of DraftKings, and the panel will be moderated by Allison Overholt, Senior Vice President, Multi-Platform Storytelling and Journalism with ESPN. The panel will run for 45 minutes, and we'll have 10 minutes at the end for Q&A. If you'd like to submit a question, please do so on Twitter using our hashtag Fanalytics. Those questions submitted with the top mentions will be selected by our moderator. And now I'll go ahead and turn it over to Allison.
Fantastic. Thanks so much. Thanks, everyone, for being here with us today. Really excited to have this conversation. Welcome to Fanalytics. It's our panel on the home field advantage, our clever way of describing how fans engage with their favorite teams and what we've learned about how to quantify fan behavior so that teams, leagues, media entities, and consumer brands can develop the smartest possible strategies for how to keep fans close. So in preparing for today, a fun thread emerged around rewinding to 2013, which is the last time that this panel took the stage here at Sloan. It's worth revisiting that for a minute just to frame up the quantum leaps that we've taken in understanding fans and what fans really want. So 5 things to get us started today. Number 1, Jess and Rob did share the stage on that same panel in 2013, so some things do stay constant. Number 2, in 2013, this panel was called e-marketing. So let that sit for just a second. We'll take Fanalytics, I think. All right, number 3, in 2013, OTT strategy wasn't, quote, a thing. It's a direct quote from our prep conversation. And according to Jess, the panel spent a lot of time talking web traffic and completely anonymized data. Also, not a thing, social media marketing. People didn't really even think about it. And lastly, number 5, in 2013, legalized sports betting was just a glimmer of a dream. So with that as a backdrop, let's dive in. Okay, let's talk, all of you. How have fans changed? Let's start.
I'll start.
Right down.
Sure. Or do you want to start? Okay.
You start, Jeff.
The biggest thing from my perspective today is, I'll call it the experiential economy. So we have people wanting to come to games and have instant, personalized experiences that they can brag about. That's the biggest change, in my opinion, and I think most people want to be able to show that they were on social media, that they had this great experience, they want to talk about it. The implications of that in terms of what fans are consuming and what we need to do as a business is, first, we got to make sure the Wi-Fi is good in the venues. We got to make sure that there's consistency in how we can communicate and personalize that communication to them. And we have to be able to communicate as closely to what they want as possible.
I would say, fans are consumers, and all the same changes you see in consumer behavior, you see in fan behavior. So, on-demand, frictionless services, curated, which is the word these days, curated experiences, unique access, customization of experience. Those are all things that are, I don't think they're just unique to Gen Z. We tend to talk about those as there's this sort of new generation of fans that consumes everything a little bit differently than even people 5 years, 10 years older than them. I think in generally that's the shift, and it's something that we've really taken note of as we think about how do we keep our fans happy, how do we service and retain our customers.
Yeah, I'd like to go back to 2013 really quickly before I answer this, because at that time, we talked a lot about the research we did that told us who our fans were. In 2010, when LeBron made the decision, that led us to create something on ESPN.com called the Heat Index, which was just an attempt to assign some reporters, and some of them may be in the room, to cover that team, right? By the end of that season, we found out that more than half of all of our page views in the NBA were Heat related. So that told us that, to Jess's point, maybe there was something to personalization after all, and that led us to form a team of people to look at all this time that was spent with all of our content And at the end, we learned that more than 80% of our entire audience came through the doorway of 6 sports and 100 teams. And of those 100 teams, 31 of the 32 NFL teams were in the top 100, which led us to think we should cover NFL teams team by team. We decided to cover the Jacksonville Jaguars anyway. And now we can tell you that there are 4 million people who have registered as Yankees fans and 4 million people who have registered as Cowboys fans and 441,000 Blue Jays fans. But to the point that was raised here, just knowing that isn't quite enough. We have to kind of understand what we see now in terms of the way in which they come to that stuff. And in 2015, there's some good news. 2015, people 18 and older were consuming about 9.5 hours of media a day. And then flash forward to today, that's up to like 11.5 hours. But the difference is television sort of decreased by 44 minutes, and mobile consumption increased by like 2.5 hours. So again, talking about website traffic is not what we need to be doing. It's really about figuring out how to be in those spaces that kind of are in your back pockets. And then layering in personalized experiences, and then going even further and being able to be where you want us to be before you even ask, right. which is difficult, but there are companies that manage to do it. Every meaningful business thing we spend time with, whether it's eBay or Amazon or others, are in this space. And so audience expectation to me is the thing that has changed the most.
So with all of that as our starting point, how have those things changed the way you think about what data is actually important to gather?
I think connectivity has changed everything, including what kind of data you can access. People have their phones with them always. So, at any point in time, they are usually, if not interacting, probably somebody in their ecosystem is interacting, and you have location data, other things that you can use even when they're not and when it's passive. But if you think about the experience, back to the question before, of going to a game, I remember when you used to go to a game and actually just sit there and watch the game, or maybe you talk to the people that were next to you, and now people are taking pictures and posting them on Instagram, and I don't know how much anymore, but maybe still Facebook in some cases. Maybe in 2013 they were posting on Facebook, but now the expectation is that you have Wi-Fi connections in the stadium, and that people are able to constantly, whether they're there anywhere else, not only be in communication with their friends and with others, but actually be in communication with anonymous people who share their interests, because personalization and data has allowed us to connect people in a way that never existed before. And I think that's transformed the fan experience. In a way, it's really the same core thing we were getting at before. It used to be people gathering around the water cooler and talking on the next day. Now it's just transformed into something so much bigger. But at our core, we all always wanted to interact. We all always wanted to have an opinion. We all always wanted to share experiences with others. And it used to be that photos were something you had in your house. Now, they're for posting online, but it's all still part of the same thing. I wanted to share with you that I was there and that this thing happened, and you can get a glimpse of what my experience might be like.
I think we talk about two things, attending the game and viewing the game. So if we think about attending the game, the most significant thing is actually knowing who the people are. We heard about it a little bit earlier today, but in 2013, frankly, in 2016, maybe 17, you would know 1 of 4 people at a game, maybe. And that would be because someone would buy a ticket for themselves and the 3 other people attending the game. Today, you heard Amy Latimer say that at the Garden, now for Bruins games, maybe for Celtics games too, they know 85% of the people coming to games. It's not as high with some of our other clients like the NFL. It can be, again, pending the team, anywhere from 20% up into 70%. So knowing the customers is the most important piece of new data that is now available, and the depth of which you can get information about what they're doing, who they're transferring their tickets to, if they're posting their tickets on the secondary, if those tickets are actually selling, is incredible. On the watching side, I mean, listen, I'm an ESPN app person, and I love that I can go and Harvard basketball is there front and center, and I can get that quick update. You guys can actually see if I watch the video, if I pause the video, if I watch it again. So from a watching perspective, making sure that you're providing more of the things that I like is phenomenal from a fan and customer perspective.
I agree with all that. You know, the mobile technology has changed everything, and particularly has given us insights into our business that we would never otherwise have. I mean, the most fundamental thing is actually who's your customer. You don't know who's watching you on television. You don't know who's sitting in your seats at your game. And just the fact that I would say as recently as 3 years ago, instead of having 85% coming through the door mobile, we know who's sitting in the seat, it was more like 15%, right? So it's been crazy, and that unlocks a whole bunch of information about how you can better service that fan if you know who's coming in, who's using the seat. If you know it's an event or an anniversary, you can visit them. If they've passed it along to someone else, you can start to form a relationship with that person. You can understand when they're making a decision as to whether or not they're going to attend the game themselves or resell the ticket. You get a good sense of the value of a ticket as it flows through from one place to another, and really the timing of when people are making decisions about when they're going to transact, when they're going to purchase. We're seeing more and more people as last-minute buyers as sort of the consumption trends change, and with this sort of frictionless world with mobile technology, the ability to move tickets quickly and easily, and all these things provide us so much insight into our business that we never had before, which, unto itself isn't all that meaningful, but to the extent it allows you to actually provide a better experience, provide better service because you know who's there, it's really revolutionized things, and pretty remarkably just in the last 3 years, I'd say.
So let's spend some more time talking about ticketing. What other patterns are we seeing around ticket purchasing? What other things are we learning from what you're able to now track, given all the tools that we just talked about?
So we have a large technology project that we've done with the NFL, and we're integrating all of their primary and secondary ticketing data. And I think the question we've been talking about going and servicing people and that type of work, what the NFL is doing and what we're able to help them do is understand where the health of their stadium is. And I think if you think about that on a more macro level, you have a couple levers that you can pull for customer experience. What is the ticket demand, price? Where are there challenges in your venue that you might want to actually make upgrades, which many venues are doing? Where do you want to spend your time? And kind of understanding what the customer challenges are. So we actually worked with the NFL and created a ticketing health index. So historically, when you would make those kinds of decisions, you would use something like retention, or you would use attendance, and you might do some correlations. We used machine learning and took hundreds of variables because we have all of this personalized data about the customer. And so it could be a season ticket member who might be posting their tickets the week of the game. You can understand if those tickets actually sold or did not sell, and if it did not sell, did they attend the game? Adding in some factors such as whether they sat in an aisle seat or in the center. There's so much information, but this is actually rolling out to across the league, that all the teams will have it, I think, next week, and they'll be able to make more informed decisions based on that. So I think in terms of our knowledge, we're taking everything to a different level and applying it in a more meaningful way. And
I think in the team business, there's a finite amount of assets, right? You've got only 40 to 50 home games, per season. We've only got 19,000 seats in the arena. So the game is all about trying to maximize the yield against those finite assets. That's how you grow. And being able to track a ticket and understand by pulling all this information out of the secondary market what the real value of a ticket is at a given point in time really informs your decisions about when you should release tickets, what's the market clearing price, what's the time to release a ticket to get the maximum price for a ticket. So after we've sold all of our season tickets and we've filled our group tickets and all those things, we hold some back and we say, when should we release these? And there was a time when we knew that you could get the maximum price if you released tickets about 11 or 12 days before the date of the event, and that's no longer true. People aren't even buying in that window anymore. They're buying when tickets go on sale, and then they're buying the day of. And you have to figure out, okay, I've got to manage accordingly, and I've got to price accordingly based on when demand is spiking for tickets. So again, it's, if you're in the team business, it's incredibly valuable information. I sit around saying, well, how do we actually operate our business before I had all this data?
50% of tickets that are sold on the secondary are sold in the last 3 days. But it can be the highest price depending on the interest and demand of that game. Otherwise,
Right.
You should have your highest price when you go on sale, because that's when there's the most interest.
Got it. So let's talk a little bit more about other aspects of the in-venue experience. What kinds of things are you seeing change about the way fans spend their time when they're at the game?
I think experiences, are big. When we look at a fan, we sort of say it's a relationship, not a transaction. And so we want to understand really for each individual fan, to the extent that we can, what creates a great experience for them, and what kind of access, amenities, and benefits around the game can we deliver that allows them to have a differentiated experience. So it's more than just going to a game. And I think that's been a real change in our business as to how we look at service. And one of the big things we've done is we've put more and more people on the service side of things to try to deliver more customized experiences. And it's not always the most scalable things that you can do, but it's the little things you can do because a customer's coming in tonight. Or it's a new space we create in the arena to create a different kind of experience. We're finding people want social experiences at games. Even in Boston, right, where the game is sacrosanct, right? Everyone should be there because they just want to be fully focused on the game for 48 minutes. But, as Amy might have alluded to, we've created a new area in the Garden called Rafters, right, which is up in the Halo, which is, where the scouts view the hockey games from, And we've got a club up there, which is really, more of a social club, and it's come to the games you want to come to, and, eat and drink what you want, and you can customize it all for yourself. And I think that's where it's going, and that's how it's kind of manifesting itself on game nights in our arenas.
Was creating Rafters a direct result of insights that you gained from fan data?
Yeah, it's. I think some of it's fan data. I think one of the things that's really great about sports is you don't have to infer a lot, right? So we can put out a survey to fans and get an open rate or a return rate of 60% of the people we send it to will not only answer all the questions in the survey, they'll give us another couple paragraphs of what they really think, right? So in the sports business, you don't have to infer a lot, It's not like trying to get shelf placement in a grocery store, right? And so the best data we get is directly from fans, and what we've sort of gleaned is that there's a generation of buyer who wants something a little different when they come into the game, and they're looking for something a little bit different than the traditional products and traditional spaces we have in there. It's interesting when we think about fantasy and gaming in a day when betting becomes legal. We think people are going to want to places where it might not be a sports book, but they're going to want places where they can congregate, right, to actually place their prop bets and be able to see odds and things that are happening in real time, be able to place bets in real time. So it's all these sort of differentiated experiences within the greater experience.
Yeah, that was one where I was hoping Jason could jump in here. What else is competing for the fans' attention when they're watching the game?
So I think what's cool about a lot of these stadiums getting upgraded with Wi-Fi is it's not a trade-off anymore. And I think they're getting smarter also, the teams, about creating experiences in venues that don't make it a trade-off anymore between watching all the games and playing fantasy or betting and being at the venue. And the venue is almost becoming more of, it's sort of always this way to speak to football. There's the tailgate party. People don't just go for the game. They go for the whole experience. And people who are playing fantasy and betting, they're starting to create, we did some of these, at Gillette and also at other places around, different leagues, where we create like lounges where you have Red Zone channel and other things on so people can actually follow the other games. So you think, well, why are you at the game if you want to be watching the others? But it's all part of one experience. And today's fan multitasks, maybe not well, but they do it because our attention spans are so short, more than anyone else, more than any other generation's fan. So they do want to be there. They do want to be watching the game and watching other games and betting or playing fantasy and socializing and drinking beer and eating and doing all those things at the same time. And that's the experience they're looking for. And if you make it better at the stadium, then they won't want to do those things on their couch. They'll want to come to the stadium and do them.
Well, and I agree 100% that being able to have the experience at the game that you can have at home is super important. I also think that the expectations of what fans are actually experiencing when they come to the games is totally changing. They want everything to be faster and seamless. So it could be everything from having grab and go stands that is meaningfully changing people's experiences. How are you going to obviously improve parking? How are you going to get people through gates? And what's been kind of interesting is some of the challenges that technology, there's a lot of positives in what it's bringing to bear in terms of knowing your customers. But if you look at football as an example, you have a divide in terms of the demographics of the fan base. Some are super comfortable with mobile and technology and having their phone on having their ticket on their phone. Others want the hard ticket. And so we're at a very interesting time where you kind of have to provide both worlds. Some people are saying, you know what, it's mobile ticketing only. It will obviously move towards mobile, but this is going to be an ongoing kind of component because we do have an older fan base that still loves to go to the games.
That's a great point you're making. Technology is advanced so fast that you have a wider generational gap than I think ever before. And you guys have to figure out, Rich and the other leagues and teams, how do you cater to different types of fans? And from an analytics standpoint, you're going to have much richer data on the people who are more technology enabled. So if you're just looking at the data, even if it's 60, 75% of it, you might actually get a skewed view of what your overall fan base looks like.
That's really interesting. You know, we've talked for years now about having a mobile-first mindset, but it really is just in these last couple of years that it's been possible to just fully lean in there. You said something interesting, Jason, in the prep for this conversation, where you mentioned that it was just in 2018 that sports betting becomes legal, and just a year ago, New Jersey was the only place that had a mobile betting app. So your entire world is getting turbocharged right now. How are you thinking about mobile betting? What are the exciting advances that are happening there? And are you seeing this same kind of gap happening? Do you worry about this kind of generational gap, or is in the world of betting, all good?
Well, because there's been an illegal sports betting market for a while, a lot already has transitioned online. And many people don't realize that yes, there are still people who call up their bookies, but a lot of people go to some website or mobile site, usually offshore somewhere, and that's how they place their bet. And a lot of the bookies have turned into money runners. They collect the money or take the deposits. They hop on a plane and fly down to the Caribbean or wherever, and that's how the money gets on and off the system, which is, of course, the safest and most convenient way to do it for everybody. So I think a lot of that has happened. That said, absolutely, there's a generational gap. I think one of the things that we're seeing is, in particular, for folks that are older, that are used to going to counters in Vegas and making bets, that is what they're comfortable with. And you have to start there with them in some cases and get them comfortable with you as a company before they trust you to be holding their money online and taking their credit card. And inherently, they are wired not to trust you. They think of the book as someone who's out to get their money. And so, being a tech company and being a very customer-centric company, and we think of ourselves much more in that vein than we do traditional bookmaker. It is an adjustment, and there is a big difference between a younger fan who's willing to just hop on, put on their credit card, and used to doing that in a variety of different places around mobile and around the internet, versus an older fan who maybe doesn't do that as much in other facets of life and would prefer an in-person experience.
Can I tie something together?
Yeah, absolutely.
So what's interesting is what's happened on the secondary market and the data that's now being made available to teams is hopefully what's going to be happening with the legalizing of gambling, which is there's a tremendous amount of data about fans and how they consume sports that is going to enhance and improve what all of the sports organizations are doing. So I think that's really important. And that battle for the information and data is going to be a big topic over the next few years.
I love that you brought that up. When I've talked to you, when I've talked to the Patriots, the other teams, Celtics, when I've talked to the leagues, the NFL, that is the thing they seem to care about the most. Yes, everyone thinks there's a financial opportunity here, but the access to the insights that the data provides, and that's one of the reasons that the leagues and teams are so excited about live betting. Not only will it engage the fan, it'll tell us with the data what the fan's engaging with. You put all kinds of live bets out and people have options. What are they choosing? And that helps as they think about everything from the in-venue experience to even things like rule changes in the games. I think you're going to see way more insight come from what people are doing in in-game betting than anyone is prepared for. The leagues and teams are all over it. I mean, anyone is in the mainstream consumer. But it's kind of a cool thing to think that what we're betting on can actually drive changes in the fan experience of the game.
I agree with that, and I think we've never really looked at gaming as a financial windfall to the Celtics or to the NBA for that matter. It's the windfall is an engagement, right? And the over-indexing of fan engagement for people who are engaged in betting on games or playing daily fantasy. And so it's that information, it's that engagement that actually drives us, because as people move away from watching games on the big flat screen television, we've got to find different ways to get their screen time, get in front of them, engage with them. And it's another way to engage with our most engaged fans. Oh, and by the way, those same fans who are placing these bets mobile, they're actually watching 6 times more television, which is great for us too.
Rod, this obviously changes everything for media, and how are we responding?
Well, first of all, I listened to this and I flash immediately to my 15-year-old son, who has thankfully emerged from the Fortnite vortex, which sounds funny and seems unrelated to sports when you think about what that actually is. That's a venue in which he's participating in playing. He is having an ongoing social interaction with a group of friends. He is purchasing more than I would like him to purchase. And all those, and he's seeing ads, he's seeing all of that in real time in the same experience. And for the generation that grew up playing Madden, you never had to sit there and wait in between plays. You participated, you chose the next play. So there is a generation that has this expectation of no downtime in the course of our live events, and an expectation of being able to participate either before or after. They have the expectation of participating with the stars themselves. That came up earlier today. There are athletes who've gone straight into social spaces in real time and gotten fined for it, but have interacted with their audiences. Anytime you've got
You don't want it too real time.
Yeah,
Not during the game.
But the generation of kids who play video games are going on to YouTube and having real lessons with the biggest stars on the planet. That's the backdrop against which we now compete. And so it does change a lot. It changes a lot in terms of the way in which we think about important content opportunities. That's why some of the access and shows that you see on ESPN Plus, which are really experimental, which give us the opportunity to work with, we worked with the great Kobe Bryant, and we work with Kevin Durant, and we work with LeBron, and that's kind of a necessary animal. Peyton Manning, that's a necessary animal right now, because we know that we're also up against a world in which, man, if Zion Williamson emerged 4 years from now when names, image, and likeness was a thing, he might not need to get a shoe deal. He had a shoe deal. He'd been done. And so,
direct to consumer.
As we think about, yes, direct to consumer, but as we think about any content, we know it has to be differentiated. We know even in the delivery, we have to be in places where people are. Watch the Snapchat channel, and it's the youngest demo we have, and 70% of the people who come to SportsCenter on Snapchat don't interact with ESPN on any other platform. And it's, again, against the backdrop of they're in an experience in which they feel as though they're participating. And so, it changes the entire game. It makes us actually excited. And Jimmy Pittar was up here earlier talking about audience expansion, but it's also really audience expectation. Social isn't just social media for us, it's social listening. We have to take this stuff and apply it to the way in which our audiences have gradually changed. Back to the theme.
Yeah, it ties together a few things that have been talked about here around the changing habits of how much time people are spending, what platforms they're spending it on, different behaviors for different generations. Often that conversation seems to be about still creating the same thing and just watching it move from place to place. what are we actually creating that is different because of what we're learning about what people want from sports media?
Well, I went through some of it. I mean, I think that we have some brilliant people in our social engagement team thinking about wherever we need to be. We will be in Quibi when it emerges, and we will learn from that space. We quickly got up to 3 million followers in TikTok, and TikTok is enjoyable to watch, but I have daughters who are 12 and 11, and it's not just about watching, it's about participating. It's about being a renegade. It's like, it's a different level of experience. So we have to think about the experiences we create that offer that same opportunity. We still believe in great storytelling. So, we create a Michael Vick documentary and show it on linear and put it behind on our direct-to-consumer service, and it does really well. We have moved into combat sports in ways that are, truly exciting and differentiated, and it's led us to interact with a whole new audience. So, it's been that's why I think you were asking, Jimmy seems so relaxed. He's had a great last year because there's been a lot of change. It's really been about opening up our minds to the ways in which ESPN has to actively be where our audiences are.
I think the important part is you've got the right content, and then how you utilize that content to serve different audiences, varies. There's no one fan and there's no one customer. So the way we engage with, a 50-year-old lawyer who buys center court seats is different than the way we engage with someone who only follows us on digital media. We want to engage with both of them. We want to have a relationship with both of them. One of them is 100% of our fan engagement and our marketing is vertical, short-form digital content, which picks up on the same things you said. It's storytelling. It's just short-form storytelling. It's access. It's unique experiences. Like around the game window, we get so much viewership around these little things we do about the guys coming into the game and whatever fashion they're wearing that night. It's like a red carpet every night, right? And fans love tuning in for that content pregame. And it's interesting that that's become a part of what's expected for a certain fan, not for all fans, but for a certain fan, and that's how we're engaging with them in and around games. So it's the important part. Obviously, you have to have the content that they care about, but the ability to sort of modify the content to fit the form, for the audience, is what's really, important these days. And I know that's, obviously it's ESPN's business.
And I want to go back to the social listening part because, to your point earlier, the sports fans, they either cheer or they boo. Like there's no quiet middle of the road. And when you spend time watching the things that folks are talking about in the social space, the things that get them excited, the videos they're sharing, it does lead you to some paths. It does lead you to paths of discovery, right? It'll lead, a 57-year-old executive to use the term drip,
It's fashionable.
Yeah, I know what it means now, but so it's a really important thing that we apply to the way in which, the way in which we do storytelling. It is really material to the way in which we stay connected to the audience. And that is, it doesn't read as data analytics per se, but it is powerful information that helps us make good choices.
So for all the folks who are in the audience trying to figure out how can they get access to the kinds of things that make your decision-making smarter, before we head to questions from the audience, I wanted to ask each of you, what are the most powerful tools that you're relying on right now so that you can make smarter decisions? Realizing, by the way, that Kager is a tool. So it's a little bit of a loaded question.
Yeah, I mean, obviously, we have built a business around getting data from a lot of different sources to better understand customers. So I think the key thing, if you're thinking about tools, is one, how are you going to make sure that you trust the data? That's the biggest challenge for anyone. Is the information coming in correctly? I think you alluded earlier. Are we capturing, or you did, Jason, are we capturing all of the right information about the demographics of the customers? Are we skewed in a certain way? We're very focused on that foundational piece. Then it's about what new data might you need to create. So we see what's happening with gambling. We see, and the information. I'm very excited about that. You see what's happening with ticketing. I'm hoping at some point in time the media will share more of their specific information with teams so that they can make better decisions about the types of marketing that they're doing to their customers. But you take all of that information and you lay it out at a consumption level for organizations to make more informed decisions. And the consumption layer can be data visualizations, it can be advanced analytics. All of these different elements help inform organizations or sports teams or sports leagues about what the customers want. Period, end of story. And then what do the teams or what do the leagues or what do the organizations do with that information to improve the experience? And that is the most challenging part that everyone is trying here. I think we have lots of people who know how to do the analytics and the thinking, but then how do they take it to the next level?
So it used to be, 10 years ago, many of the tools that exist today didn't exist. A lot of the first things I ever worked on were homegrown tools, and now it's like a totally different world, this whole industry. And it's really come from two things. One has been a focus on it. Never before has anyone cared as much. And second has been the amount of data and the different sources you can get it from has never been greater. And being able to store, process, and make sense of that all is harder than ever. And I want to come back to something you brought up at the beginning. What you were saying I think is critically important. It starts with making sure that the data you're getting in is clean, that it's right, it's accurate, it's stored and accessible in a way that you can get to, that doesn't take hours upon hours to pull. That part is really hard. And that's why a business like Jess's is so important because, years ago when it was not the kind of complex data sets that you have today, it wasn't as hard. And now that is an extraordinarily big challenge, and that is where a lot of companies fall down. Once you can get past that point, there are so many different tools, so many different ways that you can apply it, but making sure that you're actually getting the right data, making sure it's not getting corrupted by other things, making sure when you're setting up tests, they're not getting muddy. There was a company I used to work at that we saw some test results, and I was just telling this story earlier today, actually, and they just didn't make sense. And there was one man, I won't say it was a person there, whose philosophy was, I don't care, we're a data-driven company, it doesn't need to make sense, just do it. And I was kind of like, well, this isn't adding up. So I started digging in, and I found out that people in the control groups were calling up the call center, and they didn't want to upset the customer, so they're giving them the promotions and things that were supposed to be in the test groups. And it was because it was not connected to the website and to all the other aspects that were being controlled for the test. So that's why it didn't make sense, because the test was wrong. And looking at it and questioning it was an important part of getting there. And one thing I worry about is as data gets better and tools get better, people stop questioning it. And they just say, oh, the data says to do it, do it. But we like to say at DraftKings that if you can't explain it, then go back. It's not just do what the data is saying. And if you can't come up with a logical reason, it's not just to make sure it's right, it's also often that's where the insights come from. Because if you didn't expect a result and you get that result, if you can actually come up with an explanation, sometimes that leads you to thinking about something in a completely different way than you used to.
I think it's why it's so important that people who are working in sports are fans themselves, or that they're actually, this feels off. I mean, it is super important.
I'm glad you said the word people, because I think our most powerful assets are the people that are working on real-time research and insights. We're constantly taking a step back and assessing how what we're doing impacts our audiences and gives us constant feedback about what we're hearing out in the field. And then we have really great folks working in audience development in real time, particularly within our digital team that is doing real-time experiments at all time, changing headlines or doing multiple headlines across all of our groups and letting the best one win, making sure that we are constantly aware of what seems to be working, what themes seem to be working, and those insights come back. We just have amazing people who are on this.
And I would say, we've got sort of more than two audiences. You could segment it, very finely if you wanted to, but let's just sort of take the ticket buying in arena, and then the people who are generally following us all over the world, through social media, digital media. And great thing about data today is, we can use data to really service both of them really well, and with the people, we've got the one-to-one relationship who are coming into our building at night. We can ask them questions directly, we can get great insights, and we can turn that into value. For the people who are following us digitally, we've created an internal sort of algorithm that allows us to look at our social media engagement through a different lens, not just how many follows did we get or how many, likes or retweets, or comments, but it's how does one do against another, and then how can we A/B test different forms of content against each other to see what's really resonating, and you can get that data back quickly, and you can modify quickly, and you can do a better job of providing the fan with the information that they really want in the form they want, and it varies from as we all know, from platform to platform. It's a different it's a different logic, but it's all really goes towards building value for the fan and the business.
Fantastic. All right, we're going to take a few questions from the audience. This one sounds like it's for you, Jason. What have been some of the most surprising data trends related to gambling that are emerging today?
So a few things I would point to. One is, I think probably this isn't as surprising maybe as I would have thought, but a lot of people are really following and betting on their favorite teams and their home teams. And I thought at least in the initial adopter phase, you wouldn't see as much of that, but it is truly a way people are engaging. And the explanation that I hear is, I was going to watch the game and maybe a regular season game, no offense to Rich's team, in the middle of the 82 game season, you can make it a little bit more interesting by throwing some money on it. So that's one thing that we've noticed. And we could see, we actually have a graph we did of New Jersey, and we know exactly where the county dividing line is between the Eagles fans and the Giants fans, because it is clear when the Eagles play the Giants, which side, you got a blue and green kind of heat map that we did, and it literally transitions from blue to green. You could see right at the spot where it cuts off, so it's kind of interesting to look at things like that. Another thing that I would point to is I've been pleasantly surprised at early adoption for in-game betting, and the reason it's actually nowhere near where it's going to be and where it is in Europe today, but the products are incredibly underdeveloped. The amount of in-game betting you can do on US sports pales in comparison to in-game betting on sports like tennis or soccer, which is because most of these platforms were built up overseas, where sports like baseball, maybe not so much basketball, but baseball and NFL football and others have been less popular over the years. And I think that the fact that we're even at the levels we're at now shows there's an appetite for it. As the products grow, I think it will get even greater. But I thought in-game betting would barely register, and it's actually a fairly meaningful part of our revenue right now. And I think there's a tremendous amount of upside there just by adding more things for people to bet on. And then the last point I'd make is the -- prop bet at the Super Bowl is the coin toss. And I think that tells us something. People are looking to interact all throughout. They want to, the game hasn't even started yet. They want action on the coin toss because they're looking to interact and enjoy every part of the game. And if I can make the coin toss more interesting, before it was just this thing they did before the game, and maybe I care who gets the ball first, but they're going to get it the second half, so it doesn't matter. Now they got money riding on it. And to me, that just shows that there's all kinds of different things that over time we can come up with for people to bet on, and it just creates deeper and deeper engagement with the sport.
Fascinating. Lots of ticketing questions here. I'll start with this one. When it comes to knowing who is purchasing tickets, are you able to track when opposing fans purchase? And do you think it's in the best interest of your organization or fans to limit those sales? Maybe we start with, do you know, and then Rich?
I mean, you can generally identify it based on zip code and where in city that it's coming from. I think I don't think you should be limiting having opposing teams come to a venue. I think it's important for people to go and cheer on their fans. You're trying to ensure there's demand and interest, and one of the great parts of going to a game is the experience that you're having there. It certainly is better if it's people who are also cheering with you, but I think you look at what has happened with the LA Chargers, where their home games are actually away games for them because so many teams are going there, that so many fans are going to their games. That I think is certainly very challenging. But there's also opportunities for teams when they know that there's visiting team fans coming to create experiences for those folks. So an unused asset is bringing visiting team fans or allowing them the opportunity to purchase hotels potentially on site, which the home people don't need. or allow them potentially on-field access on the visiting team side. So there's ways to monetize that and not necessarily make it this negative experience.
Rich, how does that feel from the team perspective?
Well, it feels good when you're on the road and half the arena's green, and we get that occasionally. Our fans, Boston fans, as we all know, they travel well. And I think, the secondary market, the liquidity of the secondary market has opened that opportunity up where it didn't exist before. In our own arena, and not all teams, but there are a few teams that suddenly, why are all these Knicks fans here? And even when the Knicks aren't playing all that well, no intentional disparagement there. When the Knicks aren't playing that well, there's still a whole bunch of people from New York who come up for the game because they can. And the value in that for the Celtics, not so much having Knicks fans in, but providing a liquid market for our fans who might not want to go to a particular game. Part of their investment calculus these days in terms of buying a season ticket is, what's the liquidity of the resale market? And can I get a return on my investment if I decide to sell? So to the extent that people from outer markets can actually buy tickets, it's probably a good thing for our fans overall. So even if we don't love seeing them in the arena, it's overall, I think it is a good thing for business.
Mm-hmm.
It's kind of an interesting question, though. Will season ticket members maybe at some point in time, if there's two people bidding on it, get to select in that, if it's an away team and a home team, a home fan?
Yeah, I think usually the season ticket holder is somewhat disintermediated from the transaction, and it goes to whoever's going to pay the most money for the ticket. But I do think it's an empowerment for a season ticket member. There was a time when we resisted the secondary market, and now, we're in a high demand state for the Celtics and have been for a bunch of years. We don't look at our capacity as the 19,500 who can go in there tonight. We look at like 2,000 more who can actually transact on the secondary market. And to the extent we can get that data and that information, there's 2,000 more fans that we can build a relationship with.
So another one from the audience. How do you identify fans' interests when looking at what to deliver in terms of engagement and content at the stadium?
Well, there's a bunch of different ways to do that. First and foremost is actually surveying them and talking to them and getting their feedback. We talked about this a little bit earlier today. The other is obviously looking at what other, outside of the industry, what are things that are enticing and bringing people. I think right now, the kind of consistency that we've mentioned before is people want to be able to have the same experience in the venue that they have at home in terms of maybe hearing what the broadcast sounds like, or, I think in short order, probably within the next 5 years, we'll be able to wear glasses where you can see the first down markers and stuff like that. So, yeah.
How do you see sports betting and e-gaming coming together in the next few years?
So I think that betting on e-gaming is going to be a massive category, bigger than anyone knows. Think about it. Nobody really understood how big a spectator sport, eSports, was going to be even 5-10 years ago. And I'm of the belief that anything that can be a spectator sport should have a fantasy or betting component to it. What's cool about eSports is because the actual sport itself is being delivered through an electronic medium, you can get really an amazing amount of data in real time, more than you ever could possibly hope to for something being played live on a court or on ice or on a field. And that just opens up a tremendous amount of possibilities. Another thing that's different is the publishers and the level of control that they have. Not to say the sports leagues and teams don't, but they literally control the actual game itself, being able to be, those types of data access, they can stop it versus I think the leagues are still working to build that, and we'll get there, but they're not there yet. And the other thing I would mention about it is the demographic is different, tend to be younger, tend to have different sorts of interests. So it's not going to be the same as saying, hey, you're betting on football, bet on this other thing. We do see crossovers. We have fantasy esports on the products, but it's also a completely unique set of customers. There's a loyal following for fantasy esports, and that's all they play. So it's really interesting. And, I think it's still a few years off. There's some regulatory aspects to it. I think the states are, getting comfortable with traditional sports betting, in some cases sooner than they are with esports betting. But, it's a real thing, and I think it's going to be an important part of the future for us and could potentially make the category way larger than people even think.
You look like you had something you wanted to jump in there.
I don't.
You don't?
I got a 15-year-old son that doesn't make me very comfortable.
Maybe that's what I was seeing happening there. All right.
All that money he's spending on Fortnite isn't free either.
No.
So speaking of that younger generation, this question is about raising ticket prices. Raising ticket prices have driven away many Gen Zers from the in-venue experience. How can you balance enhancing that experience while trying to lure in this demographic? Is the premise of that question fair?
I do think it's fair. We're basically, you have these super high-end premium experiences, which are for a certain demographic that people want, the convenience that we talked about earlier, and you have the get-in price, which I think has actually stayed relatively steady. It hasn't meaningfully increased. I would say that I think the Gen Z are more willing to pay for the experiences. So the question seems a little off to me in that regard. But I think sports overall does need to look at the ticket pricing. What we're kind of seeing in terms of how teams are handling it is they're evaluating their venues and they're reducing parts of the stadium or parts of the venue or parts of the arena that are not of the highest demand, and they're creating more premium, or they're creating more, I think like what has really taken hold in Major League Baseball is that you're just buying a membership pass without a seat into the venue, and that is at a lower price because that customer cares less about the experience. So I think we're gonna have increasingly this divide of super premium and then get in the door, and it's gonna be incumbent upon the teams and leagues to sort out what they're gonna do. The secondary market has played a big role in that. I would say for most teams or many teams, there is a significant portion of their tickets, not a significant, let's call it 2 to 4 or 5%, that they are working with a secondary or a broker to help move their tickets. The teams need to be in the business of engaging with their customers directly. And in my opinion, the secondary market should be for the customer. I loved your point, Rich, about the fan or the season ticket member being able to get their value if it made sense for them, if they were unable to attend the game. So the secondary market is driving up the price because teams see that the tickets are selling, hopefully for most teams, above market value or above the price that their customers paid for it, and then we're increasing the price because we think that's what demand is. So it's really going to be an ongoing discussion and battle.
What are your thoughts from the team side of things?
Yeah, I mean, it's a difficult question, you know. I mean, where you want to be in the team sports business is you want to be in a high demand scenario because that's what gives you pricing power. And you've got to make hay when the sun is shining. So it's hard not to do that. But I think what you have to keep track of, and we always do, is you can't lose touch with a generation of buyers. So let's just say Gen Z. So what we've thought about with Gen Z is how do we want to engage with them and interact with them primarily through digital and social? And then how do we want to create differentiated experiences in the arena and differentiated products where the get-in price is a little different, or it's pay as you go, or once you're there, it's a more participatory event. How do we actually create, an experience for you? We think about what our Gen Z fans really care about. A lot of Gen Z fans really do care about teams having a social conscience, and how can we actually, demonstrate to them, through our actions, what our values are and our commitment, to giving back. And so we try to create these different venues. Sometimes they're for groups, they're special nights, promotional nights, for someone who can't, afford the full buy-in for a full season ticket, in the center loge seats.
All right, so as we close this thing out, one last question from me for each of you. We can go right down the line. We've talked a lot about things that you do know about fans and things that you've learned. What's one thing that you really wish you could know about fans, or what you think you need to know next?
Rich, why don't you go first now? Go down this
thing
line.
I wish
trying to think of an answer.
about fans that I know. I generally, I sort of feel like it's a hard, we're in a good spot in Boston, as Jessica tell you, with sort of, the fans kind of wear it on their sleeve. You're not trying to figure out, are we connecting, are we engaging? You see it in front of you, the demand for all the teams in Boston, right? It's not just a one-team phenomena. I mean, but I think what you really do want to understand more than anything is, are they feeling they're getting a great value proposition? We're not inexpensive for a family of four to go to any professional sporting event in Boston, and you want to make sure that no matter what happens, they leave that event and they say, I had a blast, and it was worth it, whether I spent $40 on a ticket or I spent $400 on a ticket. And so that's what we're really always trying to understand most. And there are ways to infer that, and there are ways to directly survey and get that information back. But I think that's the thing that we spend the most time thinking about, is how are we delivering that value, and are we in fact delivering enough value for the money?
Yeah, that's where I was going to go. It's really about how can we continue to really matter. We spend a lot of time thinking about our live events, and we create things on platforms that have nothing to do with our live events. How can we connect those things, right? How can a TikTok experience or a Snapchat experience accrue to somebody having another meaning with ESPN? And we're working on that. But we're in a lot of places trying to pull all those things together. It is the biggest question, because as we've said it over and over again, we're here to serve sports fans. We want to be relevant always. And as they change, we just want to know what matters most.
I just want to know what they're watching. Period. I want to know we know what they're doing in venue on an increasing basis, and what time, when they're arriving at games, when they're leaving games. The information is very valuable. I want to know what they're doing the rest of the time in terms of their fan consumption, and that information isn't being shared today.
I don't know if this exactly answers your question, but an area over the last year or two we've really started to ramp up investment in is research aimed around understanding what drives brand affinity. It's very, I think, objective in many ways to say we have this product feature, our competition doesn't, we're at this price, we're running this promotion, and you throw all those things out there, and sometimes people don't respond. They stay with the competitor. And you can't figure out why. And I think there's an analytic component to it, even if it is an emotional attachment that's driving it. What are the attributes that they're attaching to that brand? What are the reasons that they're loyal to it? And we've started to put a lot more investment behind trying to quantify that and be scientific about how we're crafting our brand strategy, and also how we're understanding our competitors' brands and why loyalty exists there, and where maybe there's openings to differentiate that currently aren't occupied by the competition.
That's fascinating. Well, a huge thank you to every single one of our panelists. That is a wrap on Fanalytics 2020.